Okay, let's dive into this. We usually just think about savings as, a number on a screen, right? Or maybe a pile of cash sitting in a bank account. But what if we completely flip that idea on its head? What if your savings actually weren't just money at all, but a literal biological shield for your brain? Today we're looking at some absolutely fascinating psychological research. It proves that saving a specific amount of money is really about protecting your cognitive capacity and ultimately your personal autonomy.
So picture this scenario for a second. It's 2 a.m. You're lying in bed just staring wide awake at the dark ceiling. Suddenly, down in the kitchen, the fridge makes this terrible, loud, grinding noise and just completely gives up on life. All your groceries are in there spoiling. And rent is due in exactly 3 days. Boom. Your heart is instantly racing, your mind starts spinning through endless worst-case scenarios, going a million miles an hour, frantically trying to figure out which bill you can afford to delay just to get a repair person out in the morning.
Look, if you have ever been there, you know exactly how exhausting and visceral that late-night panic truly is. It's awful. You're actually engaging in a psychological state that researchers call trapped animal math. I mean, the name really says it all, right? It's those desperate, sheer survival mode calculations triggered when your immediate financial obligations violently collide with a sudden, unexpected disaster. At that point, you aren't just budgeting anymore. Actually, scratch that. Your brain has flipped a primal switch. You are literally fighting for immediate survival. But here's what the research shows us, and this is where it gets crazy. This goes way beyond just feeling stressed out or losing a good night's sleep. If we move away from the emotional side of that panic, let's look at the hard scientific reality of what financial scarcity actually does to your brain. It imposes what the source material calls a mental bandwidth tax. Think about it. Your brain only has so much processing power, and scarcity starts taking a massive, unavoidable cut right off the top.
13 to 14. Let that sink in for a second. According to psychological studies of financial scarcity, 13 to 14 is the exact number of IQ points devoured by financial stress every single day you're living on the edge. You are literally losing up to 14 points of cognitive function. It's basically the biological equivalent of pulling an all-nighter every single night, simply because your brain is subconsciously worried about money.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it breaks down exactly what's happening in your head. Financial stress acts like this malicious background app running on your smartphone, silently draining your battery all the way down to zero. Scarcity diminishes your daily cognitive capacity. It completely hijacks your focus away from your work, your family, your goals. It just devours your vital mental bandwidth. So if you feel like you aren't operating at your full potential, it's not because you aren't trying hard enough. Your brain is physically preoccupied with just surviving the day. The contrast between these two states is honestly night and day. When your mental bandwidth is intact, you're capable, clear-headed, and able to plan for the future. You're essentially playing chess, right? Thinking 5 moves ahead. But when you are devoured by scarcity, wow, you're intellectually depleted. You are stuck just reacting to immediate threats as they pop up. It's like playing a super stressful game of whack-a-mole with life's emergencies. Simply put, a lack of savings physically changes how effectively your brain operates.
So the crucial point is, how do we actually stop this biological tax? How do we turn off that trapped animal math once and for all? Well, we build what the research calls the $20,000 firewall. And this concept, it completely shifts our perspective. We aren't talking about abstract, boring stuff like good financial hygiene or some distant retirement goal 30 years from now. We are talking about building a highly specific, incredibly effective defensive structure for your mind.
This firewall is a specific savings milestone. In this research model,
$20,000.
that actively blocks sudden emergencies from ever compromising your cognitive capacity. Don't think of it as a rainy day fund. Think of it like enterprise-grade cybersecurity, but for your brain. When the unexpected happens in life, because it absolutely always does, this firewall absorbs the hit entirely, so your internal hard drive doesn't crash.
Let's actually walk through the mechanics of how this firewall practically protects you. First, it catches the unexpected emergency. Yeah, exactly like that dead fridge at 2 a.m. Second, because the money is already sitting right there, it protects your mind from ever entering that devastating panic mode. There's zero lost sleep, and your focus remains totally unhijacked. And third, it prevents what should just be a minor, annoying temporary setback from spiraling out of control into a life-altering financial catastrophe. The emergency hits the wall, and the damage stops right there, dead in its tracks.
Let's move to and see how this builds. Because once your brain is fully protected and your cognitive capacity is restored, that $20,000 begins to transform into something else entirely. It actually stops being just a defensive shield, and it becomes a passport.
Specifically, it becomes your passport to the word no.
And what does that mean? Well, this passport represents pure, unadulterated leverage. It grants you real freedom of movement and, most importantly, the absolute power to reject unacceptable conditions in your life. Look, when you don't have this passport, when you're stuck living in scarcity, you are often forced to say yes to things you absolutely hate just to survive. But with this passport in hand, your options blow wide open.
The research specifically highlights this as the passport that gives a Canadian the leverage to say no to toxic bosses or bad situations. But while the source material naturally uses a Canadian context here, the power of this leverage is completely universal. Whether you live in Toronto, Tokyo, or Texas, having that financial firewall means you possess the real-world leverage to walk away. You never have to tolerate a toxic work environment or stay trapped in a terrible living situation simply because you can't afford to leave.
And this brilliantly illustrates the true return of investment of building that $20,000 account. It isn't about buying shiny consumer goods or trying to show off your wealth. No, it literally restores those 13 to 14 IQ points right back to your daily function. It instantly upgrades your entire internal operating system from day-to-day survival mode straight into long-term strategic thinking, and finally, it buys you the single greatest luxury a human being could possibly possess: complete autonomy over your own life.
So, we've explored the fascinating science of how financial scarcity literally drains your intellect and how a $20,000 firewall not only protects your brain, but genuinely buys your ultimate freedom. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. If you had that $20,000 passport sitting safely in your bank account today, what toxic situation in your life would you finally stand up and say no to? Think about the incredible leverage you could hold. Thanks for joining me today, and keep building that firewall.